I want to tell you a story today. Not a story I made up, a story about something that is true. About a man who had nothing, no savings, a job that barely covered the rent, a wife who was trying not to show how worried she was. His name was Elias, and one morning, everything changed. It was 4:58 in the morning. The town was completely silent, and in a small house on the edge of that town, Elias sat at his kitchen table. In front of him, a few crumpled bills, an empty coin purse, and a job he had to leave for at 7. He had been sitting there since 4. He did not know why. Elias had a feeling he could not name, the feeling that life was passing him by while he stood perfectly still. He was not lazy. He was not stupid. He was just stuck, in the quiet, invisible way that most people are stuck, without a clear reason and without a clear way out. I am going to tell you exactly what changed everything for him. Not a lucky break, not a new job offer, not money from somewhere unexpected. It was a clock he forgot to reset, and one decision that took about 4 seconds to make. That decision, made almost accidentally at 5 a.m., changed the entire direction of his life. On this particular morning, Elias had forgotten to reset an alarm from a different day. At exactly 5 in the morning, it rang. Most mornings, he would have silenced it immediately, gone back to bed, started another day exactly like the last one. But this morning, for reasons he could not explain, he let it ring. And then he stood up. He walked to the window and looked outside. The town was completely still. Every house dark, every street empty. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Elias felt alone in the best possible way. And he asked himself a question he had never thought to ask before. What would I do if no one was watching? If no one needed anything from me yet? If this hour belonged only to me? He stood at that window for a long time, and then he went and found an old notebook in the back of a kitchen drawer, and he sat down, and he began to write. He wrote 3 things in that notebook. The first was what he was afraid of. The second was what he actually wanted his life to look like in 5 years. And the third was one small thing, just one, that he could do differently starting today. Not a plan, not a system, just one thing. He was still writing when the first light appeared at the edge of the sky, a thin line of gold below the blue-black. Not sunrise yet, just the announcement that sunrise was coming. He looked up from the notebook and saw it through the window, and he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. The next morning, he set the alarm for 5 again. He was not sure why. He just knew he wanted to feel that again, that silence, that hour that belonged only to him. By the 3rd morning, the comfort of the warm bed argued with him. His body said stay. Something new in him said get up. By the 7th morning, something had shifted. The alarm was almost unnecessary. His body had begun to expect the hour. He would wake moments before it rang, in the deep, quiet dark, already reaching for the notebook. When that happens, when the body begins to want what the mind decided, the habit has taken hold. In that hour, he discovered something that surprised him. He had always believed he was not a creative person, not a thinker, not someone with ideas. But in the silence of 5 a.m., with no one watching, no one judging, ideas began to come, slowly at first, then more, then faster. After 2 weeks, Sarah noticed. She would hear him rise before 5 and watch him from the kitchen doorway, this man she loved, bent over his notebook in the early morning. She did not know what he was building, but she could see that he was building something. And that was the first time in a long time that she felt something lift. One morning in the 3rd week, Elias walked outside to get fresh air. He passed a small workshop at the end of his street. The light was already on, and inside, through the window, he could see an old man working, quietly, alone, at 5:15 in the morning, before the rest of the world existed. He stood outside for a long time. Then he knocked. The old man looked up from his work, looked at Elias through the glass, then walked to the door and opened it. He said, "I wondered when someone would come." Elias said, "I am sorry?" The old man said, "Come in." The workshop was extraordinary. Every surface held something in progress, tools arranged with care, and on the workbench, a piece of handmade furniture so carefully made it stopped Elias where he stood. Elias asked, "How long have you been doing this?" The old man said, 51 years. Elias said, "At 5 in the morning?" The old man set his tool down and said, "The morning is not for sleeping when you have something to build. It never has been."
Old Thomas told him, "I was exactly where you are when I was your age. No money, a family to feed, a job that paid just enough to keep me reaching for the next week. Then one morning I woke before the alarm. I had 1 hour before anyone needed me, and I decided to use it. Every morning after that, I used it." Quick pause before old Thomas shows Elias the most important number in this story. If you are finding something in this, subscribe to Golden Endings before we continue. New video every single week. Stories and real numbers about building something from nothing. Subscribe now and I will finish the story. Old Thomas walked to the workshop wall. He picked up a piece of chalk and he wrote something that Elias would remember for the rest of his life. 1 hour daily multiplied by 365 days equals 365 hours. That is more than 9 full working weeks every year.
9 extra weeks that nobody else had. Old Thomas tapped the wall and said, "That is this workshop." Let me say that again, because it deserves a moment. 1 hour a day, protected and used with intention, is 9 working weeks per year.
9 weeks that do not come from quitting your job. 9 weeks that do not require a trust fund. They come from 1 hour before anyone else wakes up every morning. But old Thomas also gave Elias a warning. He said, "The danger is not that you start and then stop. The danger is that you start and then begin to treat it like work. The moment you bring resentment into your early hour, it is finished. This hour must stay yours, a gift you give yourself, not a duty." 2 months passed. Elias did not miss a single morning, not one. There were days when he was ill, days when the cold made the kitchen feel like a different country. But he lit the candle, opened the notebook, and sat down every morning at 5. And by the end of 2 months, the notebook held a complete plan, not a vague dream, a real plan. He had been using the 5 a.m. hours to study his trade, to read books about how other men had built small businesses from very little. He had written down what he learned, page by page, morning by morning. The notebook held costs, steps, a timeline, a budget. He had designed something. He showed Sarah the complete plan, explained every page. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "How much do we need to start?" He told her. She stood up, went to the bedroom, and came back with a small wooden box. Inside the box was money she had been quietly setting aside. He had not known. She looked at him and said, "I have been waiting for you to be ready." He could not speak for a moment. He said, "How long?" She said, "Since the morning I first saw you at the table with the notebook. I knew something was happening. I just needed to wait for you to know it too." They used the money carefully. He rented a corner of old Thomas's workshop on weekends. The old man agreed for almost nothing, just the company. He began to build. He practiced the craft. He failed at things. He got better at things. He failed again and got better again. All of it driven by the planning done at 5 a.m. 3 weeks into his weekend work, he completed his first piece, a small cabinet. Simple, not perfect, but completely made by his own hands from his own plan. He brought it home and placed it in the kitchen corner. Sarah ran her hand along the top and said nothing. She did not need to. A week later, a neighbor saw the cabinet through the window during a visit. She asked who made it. Sarah said, "My husband." The neighbor said, "Would he make one for me? I'll pay for it." He made her cabinet. Then she told a friend. The friend told another. There were no advertisements, just the work. which was good enough that the people who saw it wanted it. At the 6-month mark, he sat down and did the accounting for the first time. He had completed 11 pieces. He had earned more in those 6 months, working only on weekends, than he ever expected. Not enough to leave his job yet, but enough to prove the plan was real. He sat with those numbers for a long time, and something became certain in him. He visited old Thomas that evening and showed him the numbers. The old man looked at them for a long time. Then he said, "Do you see what these numbers are?" Elias said, "A beginning?" The old man said, "No, these are the numbers of someone who got up at 5 in the morning. They are not about woodworking. They are about what happens when a daily hour is given something real to do. Whatever that thing is for you, that is the only variable."
I want to pause here and say something directly to you, because the story of Elias is not really about woodworking. It is not even really about waking up at 5. It is about what happens when you claim one daily hour, protect it, and give it something real to do.
Old Thomas said something else that Elias wrote in his notebook, and I think it's the single most important line in this entire story. He said, "The real poverty is not the absence of money, it's the absence of time that belongs to you. If you can build that, one protected hour every morning, everything else can follow." In the 14th month, he handed in his notice at the job that had barely covered the rent. His employer asked why he was leaving. He said, "I have something to build." His employer said, "That's a risk." He said, "Yes, but the other direction was also a risk. I just couldn't see it before." 2 months later, he rented his own small workspace. 1 room, 1 window, a workbench he built himself. On the very first morning, he unlocked the door, stood in the empty space, and at 5 a.m., he lit his candle, opened his notebook, and began. The same ritual, in his own place now, built by the ritual itself.
2 years after that first 5 a.m. morning, Elias's workshop had 3 regular customers, a steady income, and a waiting list. He still woke at 5 every morning. He still lit the candle. He still opened the notebook. Not because he had to, because it was his. Because that hour was the thing that had built everything else, and he was not about to stop. Now, the story of Elias is beautiful, but I want to be honest with you about what it is really about. It is not about woodworking. It is not about a specific time. It is about one thing. What happens when you stop letting the world have all of your hours? When you say, "This one is mine," and then you give it something real to do, every single morning. A young man from the neighborhood came to Elias's workshop one afternoon. He said he had heard about Elias and wanted to know how he had done it. Elias told him the truth, the plain, simple, disappointing truth. "Every morning for 2 years I woke at 5. I had 1 hour before anyone needed me. I used it." The young man waited for more. Elias said, "That is it." The young man left, looking for a more complicated answer, but he came back the next week. He said, "I tried it. I woke at 5. I did not know what to do with the hour, so I just sat with a notebook." He paused. He said, "Something happened." Elias nodded. He said, "Yes, something always does." Old Thomas passed the habit to Elias. Elias passed it to the young man. The young man would eventually pass it to someone else, not as a program, not as a system, just as a truth that a person carries after they have lived it. The truth that 1 hour in the morning, protected and used with intention, changes the direction of a life. And now I want to speak directly to you, not about Elias, about you, because you've been watching this and something in it either landed or it did not. And if something landed, I want you to name it right now. What is the thing? Not tomorrow, right now. What would you use your one protected hour for? Drop a comment right now. What would you use your 5 a.m. hour for? Write it in the comments, not for me, for yourself, because naming it is the first step toward beginning it. Old Thomas was right about that too. I read every single comment on this channel. And before you close this video, one thing. Tonight, set your alarm 15 minutes earlier than usual. Put a notebook beside your bed.
Not a grand plan, not a system, just 15 minutes earlier. And reach for the notebook before you reach for your phone. That is the whole instruction. Everything else will come from that. If you know someone who is stuck right now, the way Elias was stuck, share this video with them. Not with advice, not with a lecture, just, here, watch this. Sometimes a story does what advice never can. It shows rather than tells, and it lands differently. Let me leave you with one final image of Elias. It's the same kitchen, the same table, the same candle in the same holder on the same corner of the table, but it's 2 years later, and on the shelf beside the window, there are now 4 notebooks, each one full, each one a year of morning hours, each one a year of something becoming real. 1 hour a day, 365 hours a year, 9 working weeks, for 4 years. That's 36 extra working weeks that nobody gave him, that nobody scheduled for him, that the world did not produce. He took them every morning before anyone else was awake, one morning at a time. Nothing changed for Elias until he decided to meet the morning before it met him. One decision, made once, kept daily. The world, patient and indifferent as it always is, simply responded to the person who showed up, not once, not when it felt right, every single morning. Set the alarm, put the notebook beside the bed, reach for the notebook first. See what happens. I will see you in the next one. This is Golden Endings. If this story gave you something, hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people who need to hear it. There is an Elias in everyone's life right now, stuck and not quite sure why. The like button gets this story in front of them. Subscribe to Golden Endings for new videos every single week. Some weeks it is financial math, the real numbers behind decisions that affect your wealth every day. Some weeks it's a story like this one. Both kinds are about the same thing, building something real from wherever you are standing right now. See you next week.